Hi everyone, so this short video is going to talk you through the Eduqas GCSE English Literature paper, particularly the Inspector Calls question. So this is looking at what is on the exam for Inspector Calls and how do you answer the questions specifically for Eduqas. So firstly, you only get one question for Eduqas for an Inspector Calls, and you will have it seen. If you look on the screen there, it will be set up with the guidance to spend 45 minutes on that question. It will ask you to use the extract and the whole play, and then it will give you your question topic. And my example here says write about Sheila and how she is presented at different points in the play. So you write about both the extract and the whole play all together in one essay. There is no context marks for an Inspector Calls, so you're focusing on what is happening in the play and what Priestley's message is based on that. So the way that you're marked for this, you are marked on the assessment objectives AO1 and AO2. AO1 and AO2 are the same for all of the literature texts, so it's really good to get a bit of an understanding about what they mean. AO1 is your knowledge of the breadth of the play, all of the key moments, that ability to talk through the play chronologically. It's also your ideas in relation to the question topic that you've been given and your ability to explain how a character or a theme develops across the play. AO1 includes your use of any references, that could be direct references without quotations to the play, and your use of quotations, which you would then go on to use for your AO2. So AO1 covers the breadth of the play, so you must talk about acts 1 to 3 all the way to the end, and your depth of understanding of the events, of the characters, of the message that's implicit in there. AO2 then is your ability to explain how language, form and structure creates effect. So this is where you're going to explore and analyse some of the language that Priestley uses, some of the techniques that he might use. So you could be talking about stage directions, you could be talking about particular ways that characters speak, whether they interrupt each other, the use of very short sentences, all of that kind of thing. Could be your and AO2 is also your discussion of the writer's purpose and how the audience would react to what is being said on stage. So what does this mean for you in the exam? You need to make sure that you're really clear on the question topic. I'm going to talk about some of the previous questions that have come up already in a minute, and therefore some of the ones that we might expect to see come up over the next few exam series. And then you could do some pre-planning of that so that you're already prepared before you go into the exam. So clear on the question topic. Then you need to go through the play in order, chronologically, which means you have to have a really good knowledge of the play. That's your AO1. And you have to discuss all of the key moments in the play, no matter what the question is. So you can't just focus on only talk about, you can't just only talk about Eric's confession in Act 3. You have to start at the beginning and go all the way to the end after the inspector's left, talk about the big revelations at the end. So then you use that, this is point 3, use the question topic to explore each of those key moments. And as you're doing that, you're discussing what is Priestley's purpose, what is his intention, what is his message, and how the audience might respond to that at different points. So you're getting that breadth of knowledge of the play and that depth of understanding about what it means and what's going on. So practically then, that means the first thing that you're doing in the exam is placing the extract. They're not going to tell you where it comes from, so you need to read the extract and make sure you're clear about where that comes in the chronology of the play. And if you look on the screen, 1 to 10, I've given you a rough chronology of all of the key things in the play that shape and adapt and develop the plot and the various lines that are going on. Next thing you need to do is choose your 3 quotes from the extract. So you have to use the extracts. You have to take a quote from the beginning, middle and end of the extract. So that's your 3 quotes. And then you place that in the chronology. So like I've said already, if the extract is Eric's confession, which happens at the beginning of Act 3, and you've got your 3 quotes from Eric's confession, then you've not got that much else in Act 3 that you need to deal with. But it does mean that you need to plan all of your quotes from Acts 1 and 2 and the end of the play. So you need to make sure that you've got plenty of short or single word quotations. Aim for between 3 and 5 per act that help you talk about each of those key moments. And then you're going to analyse some of those key quotes in detail. You're going to aim for 1 per act. You can't do all of them, otherwise you'll be writing pages and pages and you'll run out of time for your other questions. But you can do 1 per act to get you the analysis marks that you need for AO2. So to kind of go over it again, your exam method then for this question. So you're going to read the question, highlights the question topic, generally theme, character, event, something like that. You're going to look at the extract and place it. Where does it come in the chronology of the text? You're going to choose your quotations from the extract, 1 from the beginning, 1 from the middle, 1 from the end. You can use more than that, obviously, but you don't want to take away from talking about the rest of the play. Then you're going to do a bullet point plan to make sure that you cover the play in chronological order. You're going to think about what are all the key moments, how is the question topic shown in those key moments, how does the question topic develop or change over the course of the play. Then you're going to do a very quick 2-sentence introduction. That would be talking about the main purpose of the question topic and a little bit of introduction to what JB Priestley's overall message is. And then you're going to do 1 paragraph per act where you are going through those key points, making sure you've ticked off all of the key events with your discussion of the question topic and with your little bits of analysis of some quotations as you go through. All right, so what are the previous questions that have come up for Eduqas already? And it is very important to caveat at this point that they are going to have to repeat characters and themes because there's a relatively small cast of inspector calls and there is a very interlinked collection of themes and events and feelings, so you will see things repeated, and you can see that with the ones that they've already selected, with 2017 and 2024 being the same character. Having said that, we have not as yet had Sheila come up as a named character, nor have we had Gerald. There are some key themes that I would expect to come up at some point. So the theme of selfishness, of guilt, the idea of family and maybe family relationships, the fact that some characters change or don't change, the discussion of unfair treatment of others, and that wouldn't just be Eva Smith, that would be the unfair treatment maybe of Sheila, all of those sorts of things. Issues of anger, even issues of fear, and there are many things that you could discuss. You could discuss money, you could discuss all sorts of different things with this, and that's why you need to have that really broad knowledge of the play so that you can pinpoint the things that you're going to want to talk about. Another thing that could come up is the treatment of Eva Smith. Even though she is not a character who appears in the play, she is obviously her story is the catalyst for the events in the play, and so she may be someone that comes up as a named as a question in the exam. Characters who influence others, characters who have power over others, all sorts of questions. So we're going to look very quickly now in the last couple of minutes at what you do when you are presented with the exam question. So we are going to imagine that the question is write about the character of Mrs. Burling and how she is presented at different points in the play. I've reminded you of the exam method that I've gone through already, and I've reminded you of the 10 key moments in the play that you're going to want to discuss. Imagine that our extract is Act 2, so that's Mrs. Burling's confession, and we would start with, so this is the end of her confession, it's not where she's talking about what happens at the charity. We would start with going through the passage and looking at some of the quotes that we could use, choosing 3 from the beginning, middle and end. And you can see I've underlined a few here. I've got a range that I could choose from the beginning where she is refusing to accept blame for her own actions and putting all of the blame onto this father who we all know ends up being Eric, and that idea that she sees him as being some sort of young like kind of idler who's wasting his time, and then that idea that she says that he needs to be dealt with very severely and compelled to publicly confess his responsibility, and the irony in that she does, as soon as she realizes that it's Eric, that is not what she wants at all, and that again comes into that whole prejudice and privilege that she has. So we've got our question on Mrs. Burling, we've chosen some of the quotes that we could use from the passage, and because the passage comes in Act 2, don't have to worry too much at the beginning of the writing your answer about which of the quotes you're going to use, and some of that may depend on timing. Go back, you're going to bullet point out on your paper what you're going to talk about, and you're going to do it as quickly using one words as you can. So you've chosen the quotes from the extract, you're planning the rest of the essay. This might be what your bullet point plan for Act 1 looks like, and this is dealing with the bit before the inspector arrives. So you've got those very early stage directions that describe all of the characters. You've got Mrs. Burling and her very stringent adherence to social norms. So telling Mr. Burling off for talking about the cook, making sure that Sheila is following the expected gender roles of a woman, and that kind of condescension that she has towards her children. And then you would go on to talking about her reactions as the play progresses, remembering that Mrs. Burling and Sheila leave the room, and so they aren't present for Mr. Burling's confession, which is why I've got maybe slightly more quotes from the early section before the inspector arrives than you might use for a different character. So for Mr. Burling, for example, he has a lot to say in Act 1. You're going to want to cover all of it, so you can't focus too closely on the individual moments you're going to want to deal with before the inspector arrives in his big speech. You're going to want to deal with what he says when the inspector first arrives. You're going to want to deal with his confession. All right, so what might this look like as a paragraph then? So I've written this up in a way that you might write this in the exam, and we're just going to have a look at it very quickly, and we'll talk about AO1 and AO2 as we go. So at the beginning of the play, Mrs. Burling is presented as a woman who is used to living a life of privilege and luxury. So we're putting in some of those key terms that we know about Mrs. Burling, showing how she's presented from the very beginning. Firstly, the stage directions described her as her husband's social superior and rather cold. And that's one of the ways that you can keep your answer slightly shorter. You're putting 2 quotes in that are important, but you're putting them together in one sentence. Priestley is implying that Mrs. Burling has been brought up to believe that she is better than everyone else, including her husband, and that she is unapproachable and cold-hearted. And you've got your explanation of those quotes. So this doesn't count as analysis, but it shows your understanding, your inference about Mrs. Burling based on those stage directions. Priestley also presents Mrs. Burling as someone who's happily adheres to expected gender and social norms. She lectures Sheila. When you're married, you'll realise that you, and then she goes on and talks about, this is the whole bit where Gerald is working a lot. You'll have to get used to that. The repeated use of you'll gives Mrs. Burling a sense of superiority. She believes she knows more than Sheila, and it is her job to educate her. And that's beginning to analyse. You've got picking out the word you'll, the discussion of it being repeated. This is underlined by her condescending attitude towards Sheila during the celebration of her engagement to Gerald. She tells Sheila off. Really, the things you girls pick up these days, repeating her traditionalist and old-fashioned views. Prissy makes it clear for the audience that Mrs. Burling is judgmental and prejudiced and inclined to criticism. Prissy is criticising the role of women like Mrs. Burling play in maintaining patriarchal exploitation of women. So as an opening paragraph about Act 1, you're setting up lots of the ideas about Mrs. Burling that you would come back and deal with as the play progresses. So let's go through some final reminders. Final reminders on how to deal with this exam question. So you're going to highlight the exam topic, you're going to place the extract in the chronology of the play and choose your 3 quotes from the extract. You're going to bullet point your plan in chronological order, dealing with the extract where it comes. You're going to have a very quick 2-sentence introduction, and then you're going to write your 1 paragraph per act, and that is your answer.